Hello everybody and welcome to Crunch My Numbers. This is the show where we explore strategies and solutions that help businesses thrive and grow. I'm your host Paul Redmond, and today's episode is one that blends personal journeys with professional insights. Today we'll be talking about business protection and how to safeguard your family and your business against unforeseen challenges. But before we dive into these strategies, we want to share some personal stories that have deeply influenced our perspectives on protection, both in life and in business. And today I'm joined by Kent Ashmore. Kent is a very close friend, business associate, and strategic partner of RDA as well. But Kent is an expert in business protection, and his story is very thoughtful. And I'm so excited that he's sharing this story, but it's really, really personal. And it helped shape my decision on how I approach this subject with all my colleagues and all my professional acquaintances and all the clients that I have. So I'm looking forward to hearing Kent's story, and I'd just like to introduce Kent. So Kent, welcome to the podcast.
Paul, thanks a million for inviting me, and delighted to be here.
So tell us a little bit about where you're based, Kent, and a little bit about your business.
Yes, Paul, I suppose having worked in Zurich in the bank insurance end of things in 2005, we decided that we were going to open up our own business. And we opened up in Temple Shannon Key in Enniscorthy with beautiful offices, lovely computer system, but an echo in the filing cabinets. And from there, that's where the whole business started, initially with mortgages. But from there, then we got totally into the whole protection side of it, the pension side of it, and have grown now to being, thankfully, one of the leading brokers in the southeast, if not maybe Leinster.
So I'd imagine the journey when you're starting out on your own, and we've talked about that in the previous podcast about set up and start the business. You know, the journey of opening that door and looking at a phone, and I was different then than it is now in terms of how to set up and run a business. So just tell us a little bit about the startup and how you got your clients initially and your customers.
Probably, I suppose, Paul, looking back, I played quite a bit of sport, and the most valuable marketing tool back then in 2005 was probably my phone book. Having played rugby for many, many years all over the country, as soon as we opened up, I sent out a text literally to every contact in my phone book, advising them that we had a new mortgage brokerage, and if they knew of anybody, come to us, and that's where it started. But it was daunting. You open that door, you walk up that stairs, you're gone from working for a big corporate into your own entity, and yeah, it was a scary moment.
I can only imagine. But the one thing, since we actually started to get to know each other and started working together, you have a very, I suppose, you have a very different and strict philosophy on how you approach financial planning with a customer. I suppose that's going to lead. We're going to talk about that today as we discuss business protection. But I suppose really to open up the conversation and how, after being working for so many years in business, and you come and you're advising all these people, it ended up that you had obviously a really personal story and a really personal battle you had. And I think if you're happy to share that battle, I think it's going to help so many people out there. But it's just tell us the story of what happened in your own family.
Yeah, in 2016, Paul, our world changed. Happily married, 3 fabulous kids. And a Christmas of that year, we were heading out, and my wife had her own business. And that particular Christmas, she was bringing all her team away for a night. I arrived that evening and getting ready to go out, and she asked me to zip up her dress. And I noticed a very, very small mole on the centre of her back that just hadn't noticed before. Said it to her, and she told me not to be panicking and not to be a hypochondriac and the whole lot. The only thing on her mind at the time was obviously
getting ready
and going out. Last thing she wanted to talk about was a mole on her back. So roll on Christmas, roll on January. We were both self-employed. We had our children, and life maybe somehow was passing us by a little bit because we were so caught up in our respective businesses. But we were away. I remember it very, very well for maybe the wrong reasons, but we were away for her birthday, sitting in London, and it was a Wednesday. And when we arrived, we were sitting there having a drink in the hotel, and I just said to her that you never really got that mole checked out. And once again, we were away, and she said, will you stop? So I actually rang our GP and made an appointment literally from the hotel in London. And so when we got back, we got back on the Thursday and met him on the Friday. And from there, the world really changed for us. There was a mole. He didn't think it was too sinister, but again, it wasn't his space. So he set us up with an appointment quite quickly with a consultant in Vincent's, and went up and met him. And again, he wanted the mole. He saw us, got us back in the next day to have the mole removed. Didn't think it was anything overly sinister. The mole was removed literally under a local anaesthetic and sent away. We went off. We came back down. We dinner or lunch on the way back down. Really thought nothing of it. This wasn't going to happen to us. And 2 weeks later, we got a phone call to go back up for a meeting with the consultant. And we knew walking into his room that day, he had a different vibe about him. And unfortunately, that's where the journey started.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that journey ended with Becky passing.
Yes, she fought an incredible fight, and there's no doubt about that. But the cancer, rather than going through it stage by stage, but it basically got a hold of her, and it ended up from that very, very small mole. She ended up with it in her legs, her uterus, breasts, spine, brain, and basically there was nowhere that it didn't get.
Yeah, I know, it was very, very aggressive, and I was with you for part of that journey myself, and I seen how you went through it, and it was heartbreaking. But on a positive note, through all of this, was one of the big things you've always said to me was, because you had the right protection in place, you were able to spend time with Becky through all the journey.
Absolutely. In her 4-year journey, Paul, I never missed an appointment with her.
Yeah.
Right, because I had great support from friends. My colleague in work was absolutely phenomenal, the heavy lifting he did. But I suppose for all the wrong reasons, the biggest commitment anyone has, or any young couple has, as we were, and at the time, was their mortgage. And on Becky's diagnosis, ultimately, our mortgage was cleared within a 2-month period. Would I still love to have a mortgage? Of course, but it's all about having the right protection in place. So our biggest as a family financial commitment was gone. So as a result of that, then, maybe my earnings were obviously cut back because I wasn't in the office as much. And my colleague Martin did a huge amount of heavy lifting for me, covering his own work and part of mine. But it allowed me to be with the children and Becky for the entire journey.
And I don't know, it's heartbreaking to hear the story, and especially when you knew everything that was going on. I can see the impact, and even sharing this story, it's very emotional sharing the story, and thank you so much for sharing it. But
I think it's important, Paul, that people know.
That's the point I'm trying to make. So, what's the lessons that shaped your approach? Now, the one thing I would say about, I'm kind of pre-answering your own question, your approach has always been protection first. But you really, when you've lived the experience and when you've seen the experience, on the other side of the experience that you've actually went through it, it's a whole different approach, and your approach is different than other brokers do. Not necessarily other brokers doing a different way, but your approach is a personal approach. And that is so important when you're sitting that you can tell the story.
Yeah, and we're 18, 19 years now out on our own, and my mantra always would have been protection first. People talk about wealth management. Financial services is all about wealth management, right?
Yeah.
But the most important part of wealth management is actually protecting your own income, okay? And the biggest asset anybody has, realistically, from a financial outlay perspective, is their mortgage, okay? If you don't protect that, suddenly, and your income, obviously, right? So, if that's not protected, the whole deck of cards falls down very, very quickly. Yeah. And when financial worries come in the window, love goes out the door. And, I've seen that with people, that maybe didn't have the right protection in place. Suddenly their world, like ours, changed overnight. And suddenly now, apart from the stress of the illness, there's also financial stress.
Yeah, and it affects every facet of the family, because financial stress is one of the most debilitating things any person can go through. And as a business owner, when the financial stress was taken off you, it just lightened the burden somewhat. Yeah,
it was one less worry, Paul.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the way of talking about it. People look at, I suppose, our business as salespeople, right?
Yeah.
I built a business on advice.
Yeah.
and giving proper advice to people, you know. Yes, everyone wants the pension and everyone wants to retire comfortably and stuff like that. But you've got to protect yourself along the journey.
But as a business owner, what we're talking about initially as part of all of this journey on the podcast is risk management.
Absolutely.
When people are looking at risk management within their personal life and their business life, like you wouldn't get into your car, drive your car without insurance. I mean, that is probably the simplest analogy. Nobody gets into the car and drives without insurance, but they don't necessarily considering protecting themselves. And anytime I've had a conversation or you've had a conversation, people always think protection is just about protecting your mortgage.
Yes.
But there is a lot of other aspects in not just the mortgage protection, but there's other things that you can protect, like your income, like your critical illness, like your serious illness. All of these form part of a proper risk management and a business protection plan. So tell us a little bit about what is business insurance, I suppose, effectively.
Business insurance is just, to be honest, Paul, it's a sexy word for life cover.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is, right? But it's just set up in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, if you and I were in business together and we're both 50% shareholders, and God forbid, I pass away or you pass away. So, apart from the emotional difficulty, suddenly life does go on, as we all know, and you have a value in our business, for example. So, how do I give that value back to your family? Right.
And the big thing is, as you have said many times, do you want to work? And is it appropriate that if there's two people in business that's not family, are you okay working with the family of the person that's deceased? So their family is now part of your business.
Absolutely. Because
and it's not fair to them because they might not necessarily have any interest. I know a lot of people that have no interest in financial planning.
Absolutely.
And so the person, the spouse or the partner or whoever's at the other side or the kids have no interest. So the idea of the life side of it and protecting that is critical, it's crucial, and it's important advice that everybody should adhere to and everybody should have the conversation. It's not about replacing the income, it's about providing for the family that's left behind and then taking the value and agreeing that between the business owners at the start. So they've agreed the value and the split on the value and how the business is calculated. So the family doesn't have to worry about that at the other side, as part of your will and part of your financial planning strategy.
Absolutely. But like in one of your previous podcasts, you referenced strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's where the strategic partnership comes in because, like, as you touched on in, was it last week's podcast, where, an accountant or a business advisor is hugely important.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So if you have an established business, and even in the early stages, a legal agreement is only really important when,
something happens.
It's needed, right? Okay. Like when, you've 2, 3, 10 directors all getting on well or whatever the case be, sure, yeah, that's grand. But it's only when there's a problem within that group then that's when, it shows how important it is that everything was set up correctly at the get-go.
So what you're saying is not a partnership agreement, it's a partnership disagreement. It's something you looked at.
That's when the trouble starts, Paul, yeah.
Here we go. We're down that journey.
So from that perspective, it's hugely important, right? Whereby in my business, I would work with accountants like yourself, who we will then all sit down around the table, work out the business value of the company, look at projections going forward, okay, and put a plan in place for maybe 1 to 3 years as regards evaluation of the company. Then we would revisit that as the company grows to ensure that those valuations are correct. Purely that in the event of something happening, that the funds are there, that the surviving business partner, director, whatever the case may be, does not have to go and either put the company under financial pressure by emptying the company's bank account, by having to raise capital to buy out the shares of the deceased's values, or end up, maybe if they can't do any of the above, that they might end up working with somebody that they don't necessarily want to work with, who might have maybe different values, might see a different route for the business, and suddenly it can lead to the demise of a business then as well. So, it's life cover, but it's written in such a way that it actually protects the business.
And it's not a done once and forget about it. It has to be reviewed. This is the point. Like, people start a business and they have a value of X, Y, or Z, or zero, or whatever it is, and but a business will change, and if a business is growing, the value needs to be looked at on a constant basis. And so the idea of doing this earlier rather than later is so important because from a cost perspective, I presume from a cost perspective that if you're young and fit and healthy, it's going to be a lot more economical to put this in place than if you're that bit older and that bit more worn out with life, that it's going to be more expensive for the life cover. Is that the case?
Yes, absolutely. Like, life cover, critical illness cover will never be as cheap as it is today because it's based on age. So today is the cheapest, it's the cheapest you'll ever get it. But you talk about reviewing the business there, it's also very important to review the family because, when I meet a couple, they might have maybe no children, right? And they might do their mortgage, we do the protection for that, okay? And if they're fortunate enough to have children going forward, their circumstances change. And that's why it's very important to work closely with us as financial advisors, because I won't necessarily know that they've had children.
Yeah.
It's not something we can monitor. We're good, but not necessarily that good.
Yeah.
So it's very important that clients work with us too, because as their circumstances change, be it, with their families, etc., businesses change, maybe another director, the business value grows. It's terribly important that the cover that we have in place is appropriate to the requirement.
So we're talking again about the synergies of working together with your group of advisors, which we constantly talk about, looking at the family first, making sure the family has appropriate level of cover for whatever their particular circumstances are. Because it's the same types of cover is available to everybody, but your personal circumstances will dictate what you're going to require for your specific family circumstances. And a change of circumstances means that you need to change. You need to review what you have in place. And also, it's always about the advisor, the accountant, the tax advisors. We talk about this group sitting down and working on the client on their behalf. So I suppose we've talked about the life cover area. I'd like to go in the next section here. I'd like to have a little bit of talk about some of the other protections that are available, like income protection, like critical illness. And the critical illness one is a particular interest to myself, and we'll talk about that, I suppose, in the next part of this. Okay, so Kent, I just want to talk a little bit about, we've done the life cover piece in terms of personal and business life cover and all that side of it. We looked at a few scenarios. So I suppose there's something worse than death. As somebody said one time, that can be. So in terms of people getting sick and people getting ill and seriously ill, what are the covers that are out there? And how do we look at that from a business perspective as well as a personal perspective?
Okay, then that's the product that we spoke about really at the beginning of this, that serious illness cover. Initially, we'll just look at that. First of all, it's for the living, okay? Yeah. That where you're diagnosed, you have that awful day, okay? And your world changes. And if you have the right protection in place, it takes away the financial worry. And I touched on that, as I said at the start of this, whereby in our situation, we had a serious illness mortgage protection in place. Thankfully, I took my own advice.
Yeah.
Which is important. Which is important.
Doctors are often their own worst patients, exactly. As the saying goes.
So on Becky's diagnosis, we filled out the form, the claim form. We sent it off to the company in question, and they tic-tacked with the consultant. And 6 weeks later, I opened the post, and there was an envelope in it. I opened the envelope, and you opened this letter. And it was probably one of the most bizarre feelings you'll ever get, whereby there's a check in it, and something that in our situation we thought was just a mole suddenly became serious.
There's a finality to it by because the insurance company is saying this is final.
Well, not necessarily final, but while the consultant was saying to us, we got the mole and we think we're good, they sent in the medical records to the insurance company in question. And they felt it serious enough to write a pretty substantial check.
For serious illness.
For serious illness cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this check arrives. Becky was still at home. Still at home, and kids are there, the whole lot. And went home that evening, and that check stayed in the drawer for weeks. And I think Paul, I said this to you at the time, and then you had your own journey in this, and I think you'll agree with what I say about that check.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, a little bit about my own personal journey. Just over 2 years ago, as part of every year we send everybody away here for all the team go away and get a simple medical and a simple blood test. And I would encourage anybody and everybody to go do a medical once a year. I ended up saving my own life anyway. It was a result of this thing, so it was fantastic. But I ended up getting diagnosed with prostate cancer. I went through the journey of prostate cancer, and for me personally, it was a very, it was a poignant journey. Obviously, when you get the news and when you get this word that you have cancer, incidentally, I got it by email, which was quite unusual. But when you get the word that you have cancer and you're facing into it, once I told my family, my wife, my two sons, once I told them that, I was okay with the journey personally, because I knew the statistics were in my favor and I had a plan. And I'm a person, if you give me a plan and tell me here's where to go. So it's two very, very different stories, in the same thing, which is for two people that know each other very well. Like both of us kind of went through both journeys together. And it's really weird anyway. But get to the other side of this, like I could appreciate it because we talked about the check when you got it and it was sitting in the press. But I never realised what it's like till you get one yourself. And I done the very same. I sat and looked at the money and I went, I'm okay. Like I'm healthy. I'm, getting out the other side of this. Like, and I'm why do this is not really appropriate. You feel like yourself, you don't deserve this check, but it's a head wrecker in one way. But it actually became something that was, we celebrated the check, we celebrated the recovery with the check because we've done a lot of things, done up the house with it basically. But it's not the idea of that. The idea is it's difficult to receive this. But I took my own advice as well. I took your advice. We looked at this, we put this in place. And it just, if I can say anything on the podcast to anybody that's here, just go sit down, talk to your family, understand what your journey is, understand the commitments that you have to face, your financial commitments, get properly protected with it. You go to your insurance broker, and I hear so many people say, I got 30 quid off my car insurance this year. My car insurance went up by 300 quid and it's a disgrace and all this stuff is going on. But nobody ever talks about business protection, income protection, which protects the income, serious illness, and life cover. They're three fairly simple enough types of product. And for me, as I said, out the other side of the journey, I got the check for the critical illness. And that's something that I wouldn't have actually put in place. It was a kind of an afterthought. Somebody said to me, you should do this, but I didn't understand the reality of you're a lot more likely in your life to get a serious illness nowadays with everything that's going on in the world. Like, cancer is on the rise. There's a lot of other illnesses on the rise. So it is important, again, to sit down. And when you get this check, and if it's done through the business, you need to have a plan for your business. So you need to understand how that check is dealt with in the business, how it's handled in terms of the financial aspects of the business, because it's different than the the shareholder protection or anything else. So a really good and important shareholders agreement that understands if something happens, what happens here. And the last product I want to ask you about, really, I talk about, is income protection. What is income protection?
I suppose the clue is in the name.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a Harry Duke moment already.
Income protection is a product that basically, if you're out of work due to accident or illness, for a long period of time, kicks in and will pay up to 75% of your income minus any social welfare benefit that you're entitled to.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, with this particular product, there's tax relief on it as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So depending on your rate of tax, you can obviously reduce your tax bill accordingly by the 20 or 40%. What is it? It's a product that is literally designed to kick in if you're out of work and due to accident or illness, as I said, but not being paid. Okay, like every insurance product, you can't be seen to gain financially from it. Okay,
yeah.
So you're working for a company, they pay you for 3 months if you're out sick, or 1 month, whatever the case may be. Then we structure a product then to kick in to cover your income from the date that your employer, stops paying you, because they can't pay you indefinitely.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's a combination then at that stage when your employer stops paying you of what you get from the social welfare, and then this will bring up the balance up.
And is there a deferment? Is there a period of time where you don't get paid?
Absolutely. Well, that's my point.
Can you? Yeah. So can
we structure this with you depending on affordability first of all, and secondly then when you might have some savings that could carry you for a while, which so this can kick in after 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 13, 26, or 52 weeks. Okay.
And the premium as a cardinal goes down
Goes
the
down
longer
accordingly
you,
then.
obviously the longer
Absolutely,
you, yeah, the longer
So,
you-
and then, but it's also judged on that particular product, Paul, just people want to be aware of it as well. It's based on your occupation. Okay.
Okay.
So, you're a white collar worker, as they'd say, an accountant, business advisor, you're sitting behind a desk or behind a mic or in front of
You're trying to tell me my job is not risky.
Well, that's debatable, but as opposed to maybe a builder, who is climbing scaffolding and on the roof or whatever the case may be. So the costs for, somebody your age as an accountant versus somebody your age as a builder would be vastly different. Okay,
Yeah, so it's occupational.
It's occupationally based as well. But again, a very good product. But like, I work in our area, Paul, is very bizarre because a lot of what we advise on, we want it to be a waste of money for people. Okay. But yet we're here advising people on their finances. And we hope when, be it business or co-directors, partnerships, single people, like we cover everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And part of our business is a waste of money.
Yeah.
Okay. But by protecting that part of it, which we hope is a waste of money, then we work on, I suppose, building wealth on the other side.
It's risk management.
Absolutely.
And you're looking at the risk and say, is it a good risk? Is it a bad risk? Do we need to go look at this risk? But you have to look at the risk because your own life and your family's life are dependent on you being properly covered off on this risk.
Yeah. Like, have I time to give you one very, very quick example?
I want to talk about examples and I want to see, I'm sure there was a lot of examples that you have. So let's just...
This is just one real life one that was actually really applicable in the last week, where we were contacted on the wealth side of it, as they call it, by this gentleman who wanted to talk to me about pension.
Yeah.
Okay. He was based down the country and we set up the Zoom for the initial chat. And during the conversation, we established that they were so excited, him and his wife and 2 kids, they just finally, having rented for years, were able to have just got their first home.
That is incredible.
And it was fantastic. It was, it was great. So now that they had their home, it was all about the future.
Yeah.
And the future in his world was a pension. So I'm chatting to him and going down through, because we make everything client specific in Ashmore Financial. So there's no generic kind of off the shelf product. So I'm chatting to him and he was telling me about his kids and his wife, and he was financially the one that was supporting the family, but his wife was the one that was actually running the family basically because she was at home. Okay. The worst paid job in the world, but probably the most important and as a single parent now, probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world. However, when they actually dealt with an institution directly, and on chatting to him, he said that he had perfect protection in place. And when he gave me the price of it, I said, you couldn't, because I knew by it. I'm a long time in the business. So on a deeper dive on it, all he had was life cover on his mortgage.
How many times have we seen that?
Absolutely.
I have loads of cover in place and my mortgage is paid
But
off.
all he had was life cover, right? The job, and he was very, he was well paid, but in his job, he was paid for a month.
Yeah.
If he was out sick. Okay? So now picture the scene. Right? Mortgage repayments, reasonably substantial. It was a lovely house. New home.
In Ireland.
And 2 children and his wife.
Yeah.
And if he got sick or was unable to work,
they can't live on social welfare.
But not with a mortgage, Paul.
Correct.
Some people have no choice, but with his outlay, and especially his new outlay of a pretty chunky mortgage. So we looked at this and I said, to the gentleman in question, what happens if? And that's what I'd ask everyone here that's listening today. Just ask yourself, what happens if? My question to him was, what happens if you got sick?
Yeah.
And suddenly there was this silence because the penny dropped with him. He was wanting to talk about pension, but he realised how exposed his wife and children were, and himself, because the serious illness cover and income protection cover is protection for living. Okay? So with a good chat about it, and suddenly his entire priority changed. And again, we go back to it. I built the business on protection and doing that. Once that's in place, and again, I go back to the hope to waste the money, but when that's in place, then we can look at kind of, saving for the future, saving for the children's education, saving for their retirement, saving for the cruise, saving for whatever they actually want. And it might be a barge on the canal, whatever the case may be, but just get your protection right. So after the conversation, he implemented, a serious illness plan, the appropriate cover, that his mortgage was covered, and he actually did further cover for his wife and children as well, that in the event of something happening, like financially they were okay.
So I suppose all I want to say is we're kind of finishing up now, but on a personal level, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, it's a difficult story to share, and it's sharing this story. I think it's going to help a lot of people out there, because I think there's an education in this, and people will understand what you're actually trying to do in terms of giving the gift of the story to everybody out here. But to see the difference in having the correct protection in place and not having the correct protection in place. You can't calculate the difference unless you sit down and hear a real life story. So both of us have real life stories of how it works.
With 18 years in business on my own, Paul, I have quite a few. Unfortunately, I have quite a few real life stories. So anyone listening to this, just ask yourselves, what if? And then go to that file, look it up, and see what you have. And if it's, and like, you may not know what you have, and that's okay too. So pick up the phone to us or your own broker. Like, this is not promotional here. This is about education. This is about making sure people are well covered. So if you have a broker, or come to us, whatever the case may be, but just look at it. Take 10 minutes and look at it.
And if people want to contact you, the details will be at the end of this podcast. You'll find them as Kent Ashmore. You'll find them on LinkedIn and everything as well. But if somebody was to go to a broker, a reputable broker, and ask them for advice on this, do they have to pay?
No, absolutely not. Okay.
Really big. So what you're saying here is somebody can go in and sit down with you, look at their whole situation, find out exactly, do a fact find on it, find out everything, and you only get paid in the event if somebody does some business with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I can't answer for every broker, Paul.
No, but I'm just saying
from an Ashmore Financial Services
from your own,
pick up the phone to us. The details, obviously you'll be providing the details if people want them. We're easy to find anyway. Give us a call, make an appointment. We can do it virtually, we can do it in-house, whatever suits you. Absolutely, we don't charge for that's for the protection side of it.
For helping people understand what the initial requirement and initial conversation and that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for anybody out there, I'm not just saying it's an offer, but it is a real thing. You go to anybody, they'll sit down and explain. And what you need to understand is your family circumstances, what's important to that. And your circumstances, you'll hear people, as we call it pub talk, you'll hear lads saying, I got this and that, and you don't need this, and you don't need that. Your family circumstances are different than the person next door to you.
But Paul, if I was to get €1 for every time you hear, those jokes will never pay out.
Yeah.
As I say, I'm an expert here, but
which is, I can categorically say, they do. They do.
And if you get nothing out of this, they do.
Yeah. So I want to just sign off today by again saying thank you, Kent. I really appreciate it. I'd love you to come back as a guest again, and we'll obviously find loads of things to talk about.
But maybe more positive things on the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the opportunity.